Maybe a bit of a familiar story, but the convergence of rising costs, labor shortages, increasing demand for manufactured construction are having a profound impact on the global construction industry. Construction costs have roughly doubled in the last decade. Skilled labor shortages, which we've discussed a little on the call already, have become a major issue in several markets. Retirements are draining talent. Some estimates suggest 41% of the current U.S. construction workforce is expected to retire in the next decade. And more recently, labor-related challenges coming from COVID and from changing economic environment. Depending on your source of information, estimates for growth in the prefabricated volumetric offsite construction spaces range from about 5 to 10 percentage points above baseline construction growth. And that's really how I think about the world, is not what the absolute growth is for offsite or prefab, but how it compares to the market overall and what that share gain is for the type of construction that we do. In the U.S., there are some really significant near-term opportunities or near-term trends we're going to be impacted by, and I think some of which is probably incorporated into the ABC projections we were just looking at. A pandemic awakening or a renewal of pipeline, a catch-up on backlog, if you will, and we're starting to see that shake loose already. Different dynamics in different sectors. Healthcare has been a little more steady through the pandemic, but commercial has certainly seen a little bit of whiplash. Overall economic market strength. I just read an article earlier this week. The Economist is predicting that capital spending in the U.S. will rise at an annual rate of 15%, and overall global investment will reach 121% of pre-recession levels by the end of 2022. Then, of course, there is the current infrastructure spending plans being iterated on and advanced in the U.S. legislature, and those will undoubtedly provide some additional tailwind. Low labor productivity story you're pretty familiar with, and it's really a shame because construction is the largest industry in the world, representing about 13% of global GDP. Some of the reasons for that: structurally, our industry is not set up to foster labor productivity. Time and cost are largely dependent on supply chain logistics, labor availability. Escalation and contingencies are budget line items that aren't necessarily tied to scope or material or labor. In much of the industry, we have a lowest price rules dynamic, which means that the focus on quality, reliability, and productivity is not what it should be. And fundamentally, traditional construction is an artisanal product. I mean, we're building everything, stick by stick, board by board, and that just doesn't lend itself to the type of productivity we've seen in other industries. We see that every day. I think the difference is that 10 or even 5 years ago, the discussion around offsite construction, around industrial, prefab, modular, was really being driven by early adopters, by forward-thinking owners. Now the demand for that is really ubiquitous among owners. Many owners have it as a strategic imperative to develop these types of solutions. It's commonplace among architects and designers who we might argue were among the early adopters and the forward thinkers to begin with. And then most significantly, I mean, for me, coming from a GC background, set of stakeholders that aren't always considered to be forward thinkers, but that's where I've seen the most growth, the most maturity. And it's GCs and not a sliver of the market, but 30, 40, 50% of GCs are actively seeking solutions to meet these needs. Specifically, the changes that all of those clients taken together are demanding go well beyond the old, cheap, fast, high quality construction paradigm, the triangle we all grew up trying to figure out how to break. What they're looking for is a reduction in costs and certainty in costs. In some cases, the latter is more important. And they've expanded the lens of evaluation for cost to not just include the day one labor and material costs, but are really looking at a total cost of ownership or a life cycle cost analysis. looking for accelerated schedules, not new, but schedule certainty, and looking for that, 1 and 2 decimal place precision that they can tie their move-ins to, that they can tie their revenue estimates to, and that help reduce general conditions. Flexibility and adaptability. This is enormous right now, and for DIRTT, flexibility and future adaptability is something we have always provided in the way our systems are constructed and are backwards compatible. But this need or this fear of designing the wrong space, either for the initial operating environment or having it be future-proof, is paramount. I mean, every health system in the country was caught on their heels in the wake of COVID and realized they didn't have facilities set up to handle the influx of negative pressure isolation rooms and COVID ICU rooms that they needed. And so there's now an acknowledgement that you don't know what the future will bring, and so you need to build the flexibility, build the adaptability into your spaces from the get-go. Demand for simplified and digital experiences. The most common use case for us, about 10% of the population, even in our industry, can read and interpret two-dimensional plans, and that creates an enormous potential for disconnect between client's vision, architect's design intent, and what actually gets built. And I'm sure you've all seen the tire swing cartoon and what the client wanted versus what they got. And streamlining that, incorporating the visual technology into the design process is more important than ever. Heightened sustainability requirements, and the difference here is we've moved, I think, well beyond specific standard rating systems like LEED or WELL or HHI. Those are all relevant, but clients are really looking at sustainability as a strategic imperative and figuring out what the right fit set of requirements are for them, and those aren't necessarily standardized around the rating bodies. And then finally, increased safety, and how do they all the way through the process, including into the operating environment.